Lieutenant Roldan is here acting as Chief of Police for the week while our chief is at training. He's here and prepared to speak on it. It was provided to you all. So right now it's completely in draft phase. The effort was taken to try to whip something together based on what other localities on this end of the state have done, as well as the feedback that you all provided at last meeting. So with that being said, are there questions? I know we've reached out to the Humane Society for their input on it. They have provided some feedback. We've also gotten some feedback from some community stakeholders as well, from West Rock and Ingevity. Apparently somehow animal restrictions and other things can have been a barrier to recruitment, which was not something I would think would be.
Well, the question I have, and it's not addressed in here, and I know Raymond deals with it in his area, and I do too, the people that feed 30 cats. Then you go and tell them to do something with the cats. Well, they're not mine. How do we take care of that? Because I know it's really bad on what, Cherry and Oak.
I think one of the things that we were working on and it's in progress is, one, we're at a point right now where all the law enforcement executives are working with the Humane Society on renegotiating the contract agreement that is in place for, you know, just how the animals are treated, what do we take, what do we do, and then also too, there was discussion on looking at a spay and neuter program for the city as well, which that's not exactly addressing the feeding of feral animals, but we could see if the Humane Society has any recommendations on language for feeding feral animals.
Well, what does the state say about if you feed a cat?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure.
Seems to me, I read it somewhere that if you feed an animal, it becomes yours. Yeah.
That's typically how it's been handled here in the past. If you call up and you've had a dog for a week, you took ownership of that dog. All right, same thing with cats. You had these cats and you're feeding them, and then you call us after 2 months, now I've got 13 of them. You've been feeding them for 2 months. And
then I guess that ties into how do we hold those people responsible for being the ones to spay and neuter. Because that is the problem, and I'm sure that's the same way with you, is the kittens get adopted out, or your guys come and get them, and then 90 days later, there's another 3 litter. Because nobody is getting, the people who are feeding them aren't taking the money they're putting into the food and going to Angels of Assisi and spending that $20-40 to get them fixed.
Well, that plus they're allowed to run in everybody else's yard.
So I think we could probably, like I said, this was a draft, so we can look at adding additional language for that, because the Humane Society actually had suggested that they would, one, they're in favor of our effort to do this, but the lieutenant met with the Humane Society today, actually in person, going over this. They actually recommended that the heat restriction be at 90 degrees, and they also had some additional points of consideration when we talk about tethering, that it's not heavy chains that are on the dog. What were the other things that you'd...
Well, those are the 2 main concerns that they had in reference to. Those are the 2 main concerns that they had in reference to dogs, was the tethering concern and the weather. So the 95 degrees was a little bit too hot. They want to reduce that to 90. And then when it came to tethering the dogs, they want to be sure there was a restriction on using a heavy chain, like a logging chain or a choke collar. So this way, the dog took off running after a cat or something, they didn't want them getting injured by that choke collar. So those were their 2 concerns. Let me see here, there was something else that they put. And then the only other concern they had was, once this is enacted, because there's a restriction on the amount of dogs or cats you could have on the property, they were just concerned if we start enforcing this and we have to remove animals, that we would work with them on a schedule, because they couldn't take all these animals at once. So.
I will say that we have received an innovative proposal from a member of the community that had suggested that we could grandfather folks in, or we could allow folks to have over that number, provided they would pay a fee, and then there would be an annual inspection just to make sure that the animals are kept in a sanitary environment, and that, two, it's also sanitary for people living in that environment. So, if someone already has, 5 teacup chihuahuas, there's no sense, if they're well kept, making someone choose which one has to go. Or if someone decided and they wanted to foster and then adopt a 5th animal, or however it is, as long as they're well cared for, not imposing that issue.
But what you're saying, what the numbers you're looking at here,
Yes.
they're all inside, you got 6 anyway.
Well, that's 6, and if you look at the wording of it, it's for if it's 2 parcels of land and multiple families. So if you have 2 houses next door to each other, you can have up to a maximum of 6 dogs, not 8. It's 4 per family, or 6 if there's adjoining properties. So that's what that's referencing. Yes. Yes.
Do we still give out dog tags and charge for those, and cat tags as well?
We do the dog tags.
Don't do the cats?
No.
That's a shame.
The dog tags, and I believe it's $5 a tag or something along those lines. And
The vet primarily is usually one who will provide the cat tags as far as like the rabies vaccination indication. But again, this is an evolving discussion, because if we do, we want to make sure we're taking everything into consideration and doing it right from a enforcement piece, and also being mindful of the community, and that we do have many animal lovers out there, and we do have some folks that at times are not as responsible as others with animal care. So trying to give the police department a little more of a clear-cut way to definitively say you're not taking care of your animals.
So off the top of anybody's head, do we know what our cat code says now?
I do know.
the current one now.
And you're talking in regards to feeding the feral cats?
No, ma'am. I'm
Or
talking
just
into
general?
cats having to be tagged. There was an ordinance passed, do you remember, BB?
Probably 6, 8 years ago.
Before my time.
And I think it was sort of similar to restrictions related to dogs staying on property.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I'm different. I'm one to think for some reason or other that there was never anything done about cats. It was just a dog license.
Mr. Popovich is looking now.
I think something needs to be done for us.
For cats.
It says the treasurer
Being
has
allowed to
authority
run and have any
license
cats as
dogs
you
and
want.
cats.
The treasurer has the
Dogs
authority to
and cats
license
on
dogs
a
and
cat.
cats.
Yep.
So moving to potentially require the licensing for cats? Well, actually doing it per se.
Well, as your code is written right now, you have a section that specifically allows for the impoundment of cats running at large.
Round them up.
You have a very limited space, at the pound, and sometimes it gets to the point where the pound informs us that we can't bring any more animals that week. So,
Jimmy, you remember anything about it?
No, sir, but I have a question. Isn't 90 degrees still hot for dogs outside?
Think like it.
Think of yourself being outside.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not-
It is.
and that's all workable. That can be, that can be changed. Now, I'll tell you, in speaking with, I would say the executives at the animal shelter, they agreed that 95 was too hot, and they also felt that 90 was reasonable.
If there's the, I guess, the
Yes.
access shelter and access to
Yes.
water piece.
Yes.
Yeah, it says they're supposed to have them on them, both dogs and cats.
Supposed to have a tag.
Yeah, it says dog and cat license tags shall be securely fastened to a substantial collar by the owner or custodian and worn by such dog or cat.
Thought that's what it said. But we just enforce it on dogs primarily.
Yeah. They're easier to catch.
Now, in reality, we don't enforce it on dogs, because I think last year, the year before, we didn't sell enough dog tags to recoup the cost of buying the tags. So that's one of the codes we need to look at. How to enforce it. What's a reasonable?
So would you guys like us to include some of the proposed changes that the Humane Society suggested, as well as potentially looking at if folks have more than the allotted animals, having some sort of process where there's a check and balance that the animals are well cared for? Because, for instance, I think there's probably a difference if someone lives in a small place and having 5 large dogs versus someone having small dogs or cats, and it all depends on the caretaking that someone's willing to give to the animals. Because it's also being mindful of the ability to forfeit the animals at the shelter, and really wanting to have the ability to prioritize and catch or remove animals that are the most vulnerable.
Do you have any idea the number of dogs or cats that's being caught?
I can tell you that specific numbers, no, right? But you're allowed a limited amount of animals at the shelter, all right? So really, it depends on the given time, all right? But I would have to say offhand that it seems that we catch a lot more cats, all right? We place out, the animal control officer places out cat traps, and there's times he's taking 5 cats down to the pound in a day.
That's my idea. Dogs, most dog owners take care of the dogs. They don't allow them to run for it. And that's the reason I was thinking you probably should have more cats going in than you do dogs.
Typically at most shelters you end up having more cats than dogs. I mean, you will end up with large breed dogs, often that go unadopted, like pit bulls, because there's oftentimes a unnecessary negative connotation with them. But I think one is to just making sure people that do have dogs, they're taking the responsible care of their dog, between the extreme heat or extreme cold, those kinds of things. And we can look at more language for cats, or we can wait till we get to the code section about cats. We can handle it either way.
Yeah, and I brought up, and just recently, that we need to think about having a kennel permit. And then a kennel would be somehow maintained and have certain regulations that it would have to be inspected on a regular basis. I know people that have hunting dogs, and for instance, somebody that raises rabbit beagles may want or decide he needs 8 or 10 dogs. The way we're talking, he can't have those 8 or 10 dogs. But if we had a kennel license to where he could buy a special permit to keep and maintain multiple number of dogs, with the idea that it would be inspected on a regular basis, I think that would allow people to have more animals, but it would have an extra cost to it. $20, $200 for a kennel license. I don't know. Or what's reasonable for a kennel license? You ever heard anything like that, Eric?
I think Allegheny County has a kennel license, if I remember right.
You don't know how much it is, do you?
Something like, I don't know, this has been 15 years ago. I was probably talking to somebody about it. I think they paid about $75 a year for that license.
And then each animal would have to have a tag also? Or just all of them is covered under the kennel?
I think it was all covered under the kennel license, but I'm not sure of that. I'm not sure.
I can get with their animal control.
Yeah, and that's, that's an option we could have. Also, I suggested a while back that we designate money in the budget to spay and neuter cats. So we go out and we catch cats, and if we got $1,000 a month to spend on neutering cats, we catch $1,000 worth of cats, however much that is, I don't know. And we have 1,000 fixed cats up to $1,000 a month.
And then what do you do with the cats? Because
You clip their ears so you'll know they've been spayed or neutered, and you turn them loose.
technically turning them loose is a violation of...
I guarantee you they're not going to multiply.
No, but it is violating our own
Code section.
code section. It's a catch-22. I mean, granted, they need neutered and.
But if you did that, if you had that process for several years, you would notice a smaller cat population quickly.
May I suggest something? When I was county attorney in Alaway County, we developed a feral cat ordinance, which specifically made it illegal to provide food to feral cats. However, it also provided an opportunity for those who felt a strong desire to feed and provide water to feral cats, a procedure by which they would obtain designation as an official caregiver through animal control. But if they chose to do that, then they were held responsible for the spay and neutering of the animal. So it's a possibility that you could use that kind of an approach too. You know, if there are people out there are folks out there that are very much, feral cat lovers, and if they feel like they really want to continue to do that, that's fine. But you're going to be responsible for doing certain things in compliance with that particular type of activity. So that's a possible ordinance inclusion. If you want to, I can provide you kind of a copy of what we had back there, see if that's something you may have an interest in.
I like that idea.
I mean, it's up to you.
I like that idea.
So, just a thought.
I'll tell you something else you might look at, because I know there's a lot of variables here, and then we're nowhere near for solving this in the next couple of weeks. But like Roldan said there, if the county's got an ordinance, we need to look at their ordinance too, because when we start coming down with the cost, I'd like to see the cost kind of held in line with whatever somebody else does, because you got a place right here in town. You know, you could be paying $100 over to school, you'd be paying $300 over to Brentwood. You know, they have half a dozen cats. You know, it's something that, try to work in line, come up with a suitable solution for everybody.
So we have some more work to do on this, and we'll bring it back. And it looks like we may come up with a separate one that deals specifically with feral cats, and also have a kennel section.
I'd like to look at a kennel licensing process. I don't know if it would work, but I've brought that up several times over the years and never does go anywhere.